The moment I realized time was catching up with me, 1,000 words. I never used to think much about getting older. Sure, I'd joke about my knees cracking or my back stiffening when I got out of bed in the morning. But deep down, I believed I still had plenty of time. You know that quiet assumption we all carry, that we'll grow old someday, but not just yet. That death and decline are distant, hazy events we don't need to worry about until some unspecified future. But then came one morning that changed everything. I remember it so vividly. It was a chilly October morning, the kind where the sunlight barely pushes through the gray clouds and everything feels a bit slower, a bit heavier. I was standing in front of the bathroom mirror, toothbrush in hand, and for the first time in a long time, I really looked at myself. There were lines under my eyes that hadn't been there last year. My once dark hair had fully surrendered to gray. But it wasn't the physical changes that hit me the hardest. It was my eyes. They looked tired, not from lack of sleep, from life. It was like they'd been carrying too much for too long, and that's when it hit me. I had become old, not old in a depressing way, not frail or helpless, just aging, quietly, inevitably. Time had crept up behind me while I was busy living. Didn't panic. I didn't cry. But I felt something deep and unfamiliar settle inside my chest, a sharp awareness that the clock was ticking and the second half of my life was moving faster than the first ever did. That same week, I was going. Threw an old box in the garage and stumbled on a photo album I hadn't touched in years. Photos of me at 25, hiking with friends, laughing without a care in the world. My children were toddlers in those pictures. Today, they're grown, with lives of their own. Some of the people in those photos, they're not even alive anymore. It made me pause. What had I done with all that time? Had I really been present for it? Had I taken care of myself the way I should have? Was I living in a way that made me proud, and more importantly, in a way that would allow me to keep living for years to come? That night, I couldn't sleep. My mind kept spiraling around the same thought. If I keep going like this, how many years do I really have left? It wasn't about fear of death, exactly. It was more about the fear of not living, of losing precious years to fatigue, poor health, or worse, regret. The next morning, I made myself a cup of tea and sat down with a notebook. No phone, no distractions. I just sat there and asked myself one question. What could I start doing today, right now, that would help me live longer, better, and with purpose? That's where the journey began. It wasn't about fad, diets, or supplements. It wasn't about some magic routine or secret doctor formula. No, it was something deeper, something so simple but powerful that it changed how I live every single day now. Something that research confirms time and again is a predictor of a longer, healthier life. But I didn't know that yet. All I knew in that moment was this: time doesn't wait. It doesn't slow down. It doesn't tap you on the shoulder and tell you when it's halfway gone. It just moves, silently, steadily. And if we don't stop to take a breath and ask ourselves what kind of life we're actually living, we'll blink and miss the best parts. So that morning in October, the one where my reflection stared back a little differently, that's when I began to change. Not out of desperation, not out of fear, but out of love. For life. For my family, for the possibility of more time, more memories, and more moments that truly matter. I didn't want to just live long. I wanted to live well. And that one question, what could I start doing today, was the spark that led me to discover the one habit I'm about to share with you. It's not a gimmick. It's not hard. But it does take intention. And once you start, you'll wonder how you ever lived without it. Because this one habit doesn't just help you live to 100. It helps you enjoy the journey along the way. I met someone who changed everything. 1,000 words. After that October morning, the one where I truly felt the weight of time, I knew something had to change. but I didn't yet know what. So I started small. I began walking more, eating better, reading books about longevity and health, but it all felt scattered, like I was trying to patch a leaky roof without knowing where the hole really was. That fire inside me, the desire to live not just longer but better, it needed direction. It needed something more than information. It needed wisdom. And as life often does when we're truly searching, it brought me an answer in the most unexpected way. It was a Wednesday morning, about 2 weeks after my mirror moment. I had signed up for a community volunteering program, partly because I wanted to stay active, partly because I knew I needed to be around people who weren't glued to their phones or racing through life, people who had lived longer than me, people who might know something I didn't. That's when I met Mr. Harold Thompson. Harold was 99 years old, 99, still walked unassisted, still had a sharp wit, still smiled like he hadn't let bitterness touch him, not even once. And when he shook my hand, it wasn't frail, it was firm, grounded, present. We were both helping organize books at the small-town library. I offered to carry a box for him, thinking I was being polite. He chuckled and said, "Son, I was lifting heavier boxes than that before you were born." He had a twinkle in his eye, the kind that made you stop and listen when he spoke. And so I did. Over the next few hours, we got to talking about life, about war, about love. He told me about losing his wife after 53 years of marriage and how he still said goodnight to her photograph every evening. He told me about his great-grandchildren who thought of him as a superhero. But then, something he said caught me by surprise. I asked him, "Harold, how do you do it? How are you still here, moving, smiling, remembering every detail like it happened yesterday?" He paused for a second, then said something I'll never forget. "Because I never stopped, having a reason to wake up." He said it so simply. No lecture, no dramatic music, just truth. He went on to explain that while most people chase health through pills, diets, or biohacking trends, the real secret, the one he'd learned over nearly a century, was to wake up every morning with purpose, not some grand mission, just something that made him feel useful, connected, and alive. Some days that purpose was walking his neighbor's dog. Other days it was fixing broken radios, something he'd been doing since the 1940s. On Sundays, it was attending his local veterans group to make the younger guys feel like someone still cared. And it wasn't about doing as much as it was about being involved, engaged, connected to others, contributing. That conversation shook something loose in me. I realized that despite all the surface-level changes I was trying to make, the healthier food, the increased steps, the meditation apps, I had lost something Harold never let go of, a deep, daily sense of purpose. He wasn't trying to live to 100. He was just trying to live well today. And it turns out that mindset, that habit, is one of the strongest predictors of longevity, according to countless studies on centenarians around the world. It wasn't the vitamins or the blood pressure stats that kept them going. It was the meaning they found in daily life, a reason to get out of bed, no matter how small. Later that week, I bought Harold a coffee and asked him if he thought purpose really could make someone live longer. He leaned back, smiled, and said, "I don't know if it makes you live longer, or just makes the years feel longer, in a good way, but either way, it's worth it." That was the moment I knew. This was the one habit I needed to build my life around, and in the next section, I'll show you exactly how I did that, how I built this habit into my routine, how it changed my energy, my health, and my relationships, and how you can do the same. Because what Harold gave me wasn't just advice, it was a wake-up call, a reminder that the most powerful thing we can do at any age is to live like we still matter, because we do. The one habit that changed my life and could add years to yours. 1,000 words. The morning after my conversation with Harold, I woke up feeling different. It wasn't a magical overnight transformation. My joints still ached a little, and the gray hairs were still there, but something inside me had shifted. I wasn't dragging myself out of bed anymore. I wanted to get up, because now I had something stirring inside me that I hadn't felt in years, a sense of purpose. And that, my friend, is the one habit that changed my life, and the one that researchers, doctors, and centenarians across the globe all point to when asked the secret to living a long, fulfilling life, having a daily purpose. Now, I know what you might be thinking. Purpose? That's not a habit. That's an abstract idea. That's what I thought, too, at first. But what Harold taught me, and what I've come to fully understand, is that purpose isn't some grand life mission that you suddenly discover like buried treasure. It's something you build into your daily routine. You cultivate it. You reinforce it. You return to it every single day. It becomes a habit, like brushing your teeth or drinking water, and when practiced consistently, it quietly transforms everything. What does daily purpose actually look like? For me, it started small. I made a list of things that brought me joy or made me feel needed. Not epic, world-changing stuff, just simple anchors. Checking in on my neighbor who recently lost her husband, teaching my granddaughter how to play chess over video chat, writing one handwritten letter a week to an old friend, tending to the small vegetable garden in my backyard, volunteering 2 hours every Thursday at the local library. None of these tasks made headlines, but each one gave my day meaning. And here's the key. I treated these actions not as chores or calendar items, but as non-negotiables, the same way I'd never skip a meal or forget to take my medicine, because they fed something deeper. Science backs it up. After I started this new rhythm, I began reading more about the science behind it. I learned that people who live with a strong sense of purpose tend to live longer, have better heart health, experience lower levels of inflammation, sleep more soundly, recover faster from illness or surgery. In fact, a 2019 study published in JAMA Network Open found that individuals with a strong life purpose had a significantly lower risk of death during the study period than those who felt aimless. And another research from the Blue Zones, the 5 regions in the world where people consistently live past 100, shows that a sense of purpose is one of the key lifestyle traits all centenarians share. In Okinawa, they call it ikigai, which roughly translates to a reason for being. In Costa Rica, it's a commitment to family and daily responsibility. In Sardinia, it's their active social roles, even into old age. No matter the country, culture, or language, purpose is the golden thread. How it changed. Me before I adopted this habit, my days often felt like they blended together. One week rolled into the next, and sometimes I couldn't even remember what I'd done on Tuesday by the time Sunday came. But now, I wake up with clarity. I have anchors in my day that bring meaning and motion. I go to sleep feeling fulfilled. Not because I crossed off a to-do list, but because I connected, contributed, and cared. My energy increased. My mind felt sharper, and people noticed. My daughter said, "Dad, you seem lighter, not thinner, lighter," like something had been lifted. And she was right. That heaviness I had felt staring at my reflection in the mirror, it was fading. And here's the most surprising part. Once I made purpose a daily habit, other good habits naturally followed. I started eating better, not out of discipline, but because I wanted to feel good enough to keep doing the things I cared about. I started walking more, joining local meetups, reconnecting with old friends. My life got fuller, and I didn't feel old anymore. I felt alive. How you can start today. If you're wondering how to build this into your life, regardless of your age or health, start here. Ask yourself, what do I enjoy that also makes me feel needed or connected? To others? Choose one action per day, just one small thing that brings you meaning. Call someone you love. Help a neighbor. Volunteer for an hour. Teach someone a skill you've mastered. Write in a journal about what matters to you. Repeat it. Don't. Wait until you feel inspired. Make it part of your daily rhythm. Purpose isn't about passion. It's about practice. Track how you feel. At the end of the week, reflect. Did you feel more energized, more connected, more present? Chances are you'll notice a shift. Maybe not earth-shattering at first, but meaningful enough to keep going. And over time, that's what adds up to a longer, more joyful life. I'm not saying this is a magic fix, but I am saying that since I've built this habit into my life, everything else has improved, and I don't just want to live to 100 for the sake of the number. I want to get there with my soul still intact, with my relationships still thriving, with my mornings still filled with something that pulls me forward. Because in the end, what's the point of adding years to our life? If we don't add life to those years, and that's what this one habit does, it adds life. What I gained, that I never expected when I started building purpose into my daily life, I thought I was doing it to live longer, to avoid slipping into that quiet kind of fading that too many people accept as normal aging. But what I didn't expect was that I'd start living deeper. It was like something inside me had been asleep for years. Not dead, just quiet. And now it was stirring again. And with it came gifts I never anticipated. Let me share with you I started connecting in ways I had forgotten. I used to go days, sometimes even weeks, without a real conversation. Not just casual chit-chat, but real connection. The kind where you feel seen, heard, where you share something a little raw and the other person holds space for it without judgment. When I started reaching out, as part of my daily purpose, practice, I noticed something unexpected. People needed me just as much as I needed them. I called my brother, whom I hadn't spoken to in months. We had always been close growing up, but life, kids, jobs, health problems, had pushed us apart. I called just to say hi, to ask how his tomatoes were growing. We ended up talking for an hour and a half, laughing so hard we both wheezed. It was the best conversation we'd had in over a decade. I wrote a letter to my oldest friend from college, a man I hadn't seen in over 40 years. I told him I missed our late-night debates about life, politics, and jazz. 2 weeks later, I got a letter back. He said he cried reading mine, said he'd been meaning to write for years but didn't know if I'd even remember him. Of course, I did. That one letter restarted a friendship that was sleeping, and all it took was purpose-driven action. I became less afraid of dying. Now this one might sound strange, but the truth is, before I began this journey, I was scared. Not of death itself, but of irrelevance, of becoming invisible, of being one of those people who quietly disappear from the world and no one really notices for a while. But something shifted. Once I started living with intention, once I gave myself a reason to wake up and serve others in small ways, I realized I wasn't fading. I was growing, and with that growth came peace. Now, instead of counting the years I might have left, I count the moments that matter. The smiles I've caused, the people I've checked on, the conversations I've sparked, the laughter I've shared. I don't fear dying as much anymore. Because I'm finally living. My mind became sharper. Without brain games, I used to worry about memory loss. I'd forget names. I'd walk into a room and not remember why. I downloaded brain training apps and crossword puzzles thinking that would help. But you know what helped more than anything? Being useful. When I started tutoring local kids in reading every Tuesday, I had to prepare. I had to listen closely. I had to remember their names, their struggles, their strengths. My brain, it turned out, didn't need digital games. It needed real purpose. Purpose lights up parts of the brain that passivity can't touch. It stimulates thought, emotion, memory, and motivation. Now I feel mentally awake again. Not perfect, not 25, but sharper than I've felt in years. My relationships got stronger. Something magical happens when you stop waiting to be invited and instead start offering yourself. I stopped waiting for my kids to call. I started sending them voice messages, short ones, just updates about my garden or asking how their week was going. No guilt, no pressure, just love. They started replying more. My granddaughter began sending me photos of her art projects. My son, who I thought was too busy, started calling every Sunday like clockwork. Not because I demanded it, but because I showed up first. And you know what? It changed the energy between us. There was less awkwardness, more warmth. Purpose brought me back into their world without force, just presence. Joy returned. In the smallest moments one morning, I was trimming the hedges when a butterfly landed on the sleeve of my jacket. Now, I don't usually pause for insects, but this time, I did. I stood still, watching it. Not rushing, not thinking about the next task, just being there. That tiny moment felt holy. And I realized, this is what I was missing before. The ability to slow down enough to see beauty in ordinary things. Purpose didn't just give me energy. It gave me eyes to see. Sunrises felt softer. Coffee tasted better. Even the creaks in my knees became reminders that I was still here, still able to serve, still able to smile. The habit that keeps giving. There's a reason I keep calling. This a habit, not a one-time revelation or motivational buzz, because purpose is like a muscle. You've got to use it, feed it, tend to it daily. Some days I wake up feeling tired, even a little grumpy. That's life. But now I ask myself, what's one thing I can do today that makes me useful? And that question always gets me moving again. It's no longer about adding years to my life. It's about adding meaning to the years I've already got. The ripple effect. Here's something else I didn't expect. Other people started changing too. My neighbor, who mostly kept to himself, saw me planting flowers in my front yard and decided to start his own little garden. The library where I volunteer saw more seniors coming in, not just for books, but to offer help, to teach, to connect. My story, it turns out, wasn't just mine. It became a spark for others, and that might be the most beautiful surprise of all, how one person's choice to live with purpose can inspire others to do the same. I set out to extend my life. What I gained instead was depth. Now every day is a gift I unwrap with curiosity. I don't waste time wishing for the past or worrying about the future. I live in it, right here, right now. And I owe that shift not to a supplement or a treadmill, but to one quiet habit that changed everything. If you want to live to 100, start here. If you've made it this far with me, thank you. I've shared pieces of my life that I once kept to myself, not out of shame, but because I didn't think anyone needed to hear them. But now I know that the one habit that quietly turned my life around, the one that scientists, centenarians, and even spiritual teachers agree on, might be the very habit someone out there needs to hear about. So let me say this clearly. If you want to live to 100, not just exist, but thrive, start with purpose. Start small. Start now. Let me walk you through what that can look like in your life, no matter your age, your health, your background, or how lost you might feel right now. Step 1. Look in the mirror. But really look. This is where it all began. For me. I remember one morning, about a year ago now, I stood in front of the bathroom mirror and stared at myself longer than usual. I looked beyond the lines on my face, past the thinning hair and the tired eyes. I asked myself, not aloud but deep inside, am I still living or just existing? That moment changed everything. Before you can build a habit of purpose, you've got to get honest with yourself. It's okay to admit you feel aimless, or numb, or lonely. I did. Many people do. They just don't talk about it. But when you look in that mirror, don't just see what's faded. See what's still alive. If there's breath in your lungs and even a flicker of desire to feel more connected, more joyful, more meaningful, then the spark is there, and that's all you need. Step 2. Write down our 3 things that matter to you. I'm not asking you to write a 5-year plan or list every regret you've ever had. Just grab a piece of paper, not a phone, not a laptop, but real pen and paper, and write down 3 things that give you even a sliver of joy, energy, or meaning. Here were mine: being a supportive father and grandfather, sharing wisdom with the younger generation. Spending time in nature. Yours might look different. Maybe you love cooking. Maybe it's your faith. Maybe it's fixing old radios or talking to people or taking care of animals. Whatever it is, write it down. That list is the soil your purpose will grow from. Step 3. Turn one of those things into a daily practice. Now, here's where we turn inspiration into action. Because purpose is not a feeling, it's a behavior. Pick just one thing from that list and ask yourself, how can I show up for this in some small way, every day? If your joy comes from helping others, maybe it's checking in on a neighbor or volunteering at a food bank once a week. If it's connecting with family, maybe you start with one message a day to a loved one. If it's creativity, pick up that paintbrush or that guitar again, even if it's just for 5 minutes. Here's the thing. The power isn't in the size of the action. It's in the consistency. One purposeful act a day rewires your brain. It shifts your identity. It builds emotional resilience. Do it long enough, and it becomes your new normal. Step 4. Build a purpose stack into your routine. One of the tricks that helped me stick with it was what I call my purpose stack. Think of it like this. Just like you have a morning routine, maybe coffee, the news, a walk, you can stack a meaningful habit into something you're already doing. For example, after your morning coffee, call one person just to check in. After lunch, write one sentence in a journal about what you're grateful for. After watching the evening news, send one encouraging message to someone you haven't spoken to in a while. When you attach your new purpose habit to something familiar, it becomes easier, more natural, and before long, it doesn't feel like an effort. It feels like you. Step 5. Share your story. This might be the most important part. Once I began living with purpose, I realized something unexpected. My story wasn't just about me. There are people out there, maybe your grandkids, your friends, even strangers on the internet, who need to see someone like you living with meaning. Because when we see others choosing purpose, we're reminded that we can choose it too. Start simple. Share a memory. Tell someone what you've learned. Encourage someone who's struggling. Write letters. Tell stories. Teach. Guide. Be the elder the world needs again. Because you are, whether you feel like it or not. What legacy really means. A lot of people talk about legacy like it's about money or achievements or plaques on a wall, but let me tell you something I've learned from people who've lived to 90, 100, even 105. Legacy isn't what you leave behind. It's what you leave within people. And purpose, practiced daily, lived quietly, shared generously, is one of the most powerful legacies you can ever create. You don't have to be famous. You don't need 1 million followers. If one person feels more alive, more loved, or more hopeful because you showed up, that's a legacy worth more than gold. What if you started today? Imagine yourself 6 months from now. Not richer, not thinner, not younger, but more alive, more connected, more grounded in who you are and why you matter. That future isn't a fantasy. It's a habit away. Start today. Choose one purposeful action. Do it. Then do it again tomorrow. That's how it began for me. And every day since, I've woken up with more clarity, more strength, more joy. And if you stay with it, if you keep choosing purpose day after day, I promise, no matter your age, you won't just add years to your life. You'll add life to your years. Final words. This one habit, living with daily purpose, gave me more than energy, more than health. It gave me myself back. And I truly believe it can do the same for you. Not next year, not someday, today. So my friend, what's your reason for getting up tomorrow?